you very much, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, MPs, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know whether I'm never invited to a conference how to develop the economy in the times of certainty. It's always uncertainty, risks, because there are no such times which are times of certainty. We're always living in the times of increasing uncertainty. And I could also say, as Carsten, and I always would say that to my colleagues, that the year that we just closed was quite difficult, but the one we are facing is going to be even more difficult. And it has always been proven right that the next year was even more difficult. And I'm afraid that this may happen again. When we are living in times of the uncertainty, Leszek Kołakowski, a Polish philosopher, said that everything that we do is about reducing the uncertainty. We are developing houses, we are developing our knowledge, we are studying, we are getting insured in all the places, but of course it's best when we do it at PZU. And it's all aimed at reducing the uncertainty. If certain things are black swans, which we cannot predict altogether, or we cannot be able to reduce this uncertainty, I would like to propose three mechanisms that would enable to navigate the world of uncertainty better. Because when we face Brexit, China, Russia, when the monetary policy is no longer working out, when the economic crisis is changing its form, and it's been around for 10 years, what kind of frameworks within this economic policy are right? I would like to propose a discussion. First element is a master plan which contains elements of agility, flexibility, but also charters certain directions, industries of the future, shows development of certain events which should materialize. And in our case, electromobility, focusing on the development of shipyard industry, automobile clusters, which is not in conflict with one another, focusing on education. These are some of the frameworks. And when we talk to entrepreneurs, it is not in the spirit of the centrally planned economy showing them how the reality will look like, because it's impossible. And if I wanted you to take away anything from my statement, is the fact that I don't believe in dichotomy, central planning versus the state as a night watch person. Because for 27 years we've been intimidated by this kind of dichotomy, and it's not true. Because some of the most successful countries were incorporating the state into the management of the economy. So the master plan is the first framework. The second element, which is crucial, is something which may surprise some of you, and namely the social cohesion. Well, this is a European newspeak. In Polish, it's just solidarity. And why I believe this is a very important element in the overall economic policy. It is a discovery of the world elites in the last 2 years that they keep to be surprised that we have Brexit in the UK, that the Italian referendum was lost by the Prime Minister, and we had Mr. Trump in the US. You would also, some of you would add Polish election result in Poland. These are some of the black swans. And I think that social cohesion is crucial for the next 20 years. It is impossible to develop an economic policy in abstraction from the society, and we don't have a society. We cannot have a society waiting in the wings and we will wait until the tide will raise all the boats. Today we realize that it's impossible to develop an economy without the society, because the society will quickly start protesting. It's not only Poland, we also have Greece and other countries. But even in the US, the heartland of capitalism, we have such a huge divide and such brutal statistics. When we talk 10, 90, not 20, 80%, for 90% of the American society over the last 40 years, the real revenue has not changed. For 0.01, the revenue increased by 600%. For 0.001, the revenue increased by 300. For 1%, by 100%, and for 90%, they haven't budged. So this is an element of creating a certain awareness, which is fundamentally important in terms of the society. And a third element that I wanted to draw your attention to is flexibility. If we don't know what we don't know, which is a phrase coined by Mr. Rumsfeld, then, and I can see here lots of colleagues from the management board of WBK, you will confirm that we were always able to weather a lot of crises, among other things, because we were trying to be flexible. And managing the company, managing a fraction is easier than managing a bigger part, but an element of agility and flexibility and adaptability is of a paramount importance, and I think it will prove to be decisive whether societies and economies, because as I've said 2 minutes ago, this is just one thing, whether they will succeed or there will be some deeper troubles. When I think about flexibility, which is a common thread throughout history, well, Salamino battle, Greek armies, which were much more agile with bigger armies, so we need such strategies within the master plan, keeping the social cohesion in the center of the strategy, as much of an agility as possible, and not extremes, just like central planning or 5 years plans, and not the state as just as a keeper, but the agility that we need to navigate such circumstances. Recently, I came across an interesting book of two Nobel Prize laureates, Akerlof and Schiller, who were writing that Fishing Equilibrium is the title of Fishing Force. It is a very interesting perspective, because from the center of the American miracle, they are asking for a new miracle, and they say we are not going to have one if we don't do away with something which is part of the political dispute and social dispute, whether we should have a model based on the current development, which is more neoliberal, where individual groups were trying to be as successful as possible, or it should be more sustainable, democratic and solidarity-based. And I was really pleased that in the writing of these Nobel Prize laureates, who are not the clear critics of the current economy, they are more nuanced. However, they use a term
equilibrium, które gdzieś tam zawsze gospodarka dąży do znalezienia tej równowagi.
Misleading equilibrium, and this is not true, because on one hand we have various externalities, errors of the market that we've known for many centuries, which manifest themselves in the damage to the environment, the taxes not being collected, and we identified it a year ago. And there is this trap of weak institutions, and we were trailing behind when it comes to the tax collection in the EU, and I will return to that. And last but not least, as part of this reasoning, some of the lobbying groups, and this is a certain element of a dispute which is very difficult. Probably in this room the temperature is increasing because we have a group of lawyers architects are trying to make sure that their interests is represented. If the country is weak, if the state is weak, then different things happen, meaning that 80% of the society thinks, what's going on? We have this economic growth, 30% over the recent 8 years, but the salaries increase only by 15%. From the perspective of Mr. Smith, it is difficult to explain that the lower is your salary, the better, because that will contribute to the competitiveness of the economy. And it means much more investment. The entrepreneurs say, lower the taxes and we are going to invest more. Beautiful, but it's not true. Because the taxes were lowered, especially in 2004. But the investment in the proportion to GDP, including Polish economies, haven't budged. So high competitiveness translated into the higher profits, and the companies were going to tax havens, and they were doing all kinds of share buybacks, and it had nothing to do with the investment in real economy. And as a result, this year's Davos, as part of this reasoning, was absolutely unique. 2 or 3 years ago, or even 1 year ago, but especially 2 or 3 years ago, the presidents of the largest corporations were suggesting that we should continue to lower the taxes for the companies. This year, everyone realized that it's not the right path. We don't want to decrease the taxes. We want to increase the redistribution rate. So the new catchword or buzzword is pre-distribution. Redistribution, and the effect should be similar. And there was an attack against the taxation havens, and it was a target of a lot of discussions. So, and the line was that the tax collection should be increased. And I promise that I will return to this aspect because I think it is very important. Because in the times of uncertainty, as the organizers of the conference asked me to address it, it is very important to define certain frames and frameworks, and they are contained in the constitution of the business in more than 100 changes, which should define how will be the quality of the function of the market, the proportionality, the benefit of innocence, or the assumption of the innocence. So these are the frameworks within which we should operate. And thanks to this, we'll be able to be more predictable. But the frameworks are also about the taxation policy. what we have experienced so far wasn't as much an error in the system, but the whole system was erroneous, because everywhere we were collecting less taxes. So and we were at loss. What was the reason for that? And I think that I have a good news for you, that basically we are not thinking about increasing the taxes as the sources where we will look for 40 to 50 billion that we distributed to people in the form of 500 plus program or cheap tenement buildings. Yesterday I was in Cambridge. I spoke to many young persons, and for them, because they are not afraid of not having a job, but they cannot afford to live in Warsaw, to buy a flat 10,000 zloty per square meter, in Warsaw 5,000 zloty per square meter, in a small city it's about 3,500. So all these we'll try to finance these expenditures to make sure that the state is able to tighten, because the PwC says that the gap is from 30 to 50 billion. And in terms of CIT tax, it's from 10 to 20 billion. It's such a great taxation divide or gap. We are going to try to eliminate this weakness, and thanks to this in the economy, we are going to reduce the level of uncertainty, and we will see 40-50 billion that we didn't see so far, not from the union funds. And we were able to develop a portfolio for 15 billion zloty, and many projects were started. We are entering a new area of the financial engineering. We are going to use the sources that nobody thought about before. For example, the VAT mafias will be our target, and we are going to curtail their activities in terms of the tax evasion. So we'll see new money. And finally, in order to reduce the uncertainty, probably some of you will be surprised, but I wanted to say something new. In order to reduce this uncertainty, we should reduce our dependency. We are a peripheral economy, and I don't define it in geographical terms, but in terms of economic definition. It's an economy which can be easily replaced. Singapore is much more difficult to be replaced. Korea, a country which is similar in size to Poland, it's much more difficult to replace, because we don't have our unique brands which generate high margins, added value. We are a dependent country. Two very interesting economists, Andreas Nolke and Ariel Friegenhardt, came up with a new typology of economies. So far we had two types: a liberal economy, Anglo-Saxon model, and we may wonder whether it still continues to be liberal, because we hear a lot of protectionism ideas. And the second economy model is a coordinated economy: Japanese, German, Chinese coordinated economy. And a third model, a dependent economy. And here Poland was shown as a flagship, and other Central and Eastern European countries. And some of the columnists say it's a colonized economy. I'm not using this term, but in order to make it clearer what is the scale of this far-reaching dependence, This is what some of the columnists used. And Sarah Carlos, a chief analyst from Moody's, believes that this is our weakness. In order to increase our opportunity for our perspective being raised, and I also see members of the board from PKOSA, we are decreasing our dependence by domestication, by repolonization, some of the branches. Sarah Carlos was saying that this dependence is not important. What counts is that you are liberal, but it is important that we have the core of economy, which is Poland-centered and is creating this value added, and we are making sure that the decision about mergers and acquisitions are made here. So, looking from this perspective, I believe that in closing, I would say that in order to better function, to make sure that the policy functions better, we are trying to make sure that this great transfer of 40 or 50 billion will try to finance largely not by increasing taxes, so you as entrepreneurs can sigh with relief, but by tightening the taxation system. But apart from that, additionally, flexibility, master plan, which is part of the plan for the responsible development, and something which has just been fledgling in the minds of decision makers, the social cohesion. We are all on the same boat. We're all on the same boat again, and we should try to reduce the level of inequalities. And finally, the punchline, the lower the inequalities, the lower the uncertainties. We were able to reduce the uncertainties or the inequalities between the countries thanks to the great development of China, but inequalities within the countries are very important to make sure that the economies are stable and that we have prosperity of the whole society.